Hello, welcome to Lily's Stories, where I share my passion for storytelling. Hope you enjoy the journey. The bustling airport terminal echoed with a cacophony of announcements and hurried footsteps. Amidst the chaos, Maria stood frozen, her arms trembling as she cradled her newborn daughter. The weight of her decision pressed down on her chest, making each breath a struggle. Maria's eyes darted nervously between the departures board and the approaching social worker. Time seemed to slow as she memorized every detail of her baby's face, the tiny button nose, the wispy brown hair, the rosebud lips that would never call her mama. The acrid smell of jet fuel permeated the air, mingling with the sweet powdery scent of her infant. Maria inhaled deeply, trying to imprint this moment in her memory. Tears streamed down her face, leaving salty trails on her cheeks. As the social worker drew near, Maria's grip on her daughter tightened instinctively. Her mind raced with doubts and fears. Was she making the right choice? Would her baby understand one day why she had to leave? The social worker's face was a mask of professional sympathy. She extended her arms, waiting patiently for Maria to hand over the child. Maria's body refused to comply, every fiber of her being screaming in protest. In the distance, immigration officers scanned the crowd. Their presence added urgency to the already tense situation. Maria knew her time was running out. She had to board her flight soon, or risk losing everything she had sacrificed for. With trembling hands, Maria reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. She tucked it gently into the baby's blanket, a final message, a promise, a piece of her heart left behind. The social worker stepped closer, her outstretched arms an unspoken demand. Maria looked down at her daughter one last time, committing every detail to memory. The soft curve of her cheek, the tiny fingers curled into a fist, the peaceful rise and fall of her chest as she slept, unaware of the heart-wrenching goodbye taking place. Maria pressed her lips to her daughter's forehead, inhaling her scent one last time. Then, with a strength she did not know she possessed, she placed the baby in the social worker's arms. The moment her hands left the warm bundle, Maria felt a piece of her soul tear away. As the social worker turned to leave, Maria's legs threatened to give way. She steadied herself against a nearby pillar, watching as her most precious possession disappeared into the crowd. The sound of a departing plane roared overhead, a stark reminder of the journey that lay ahead. Maria forced herself to turn away, hefting her small bag onto her shoulder. Each step towards the security checkpoint felt like walking through quicksand. She did not allow herself to look back, knowing that if she did, her resolve would crumble. As she handed her ticket to the attendant, Maria silently vowed that this separation would not be forever. Someday, somehow, she would find her way back to her daughter. With that promise etched in her heart, Maria stepped forward into an uncertain future, leaving behind the most important part of herself in a country she could no longer call home. Years had passed since Maria's heart-wrenching departure. The small, sparsely furnished apartment she now called home bore little resemblance to the life she had left behind. Faded wallpaper peeled at the corners, and the worn carpet had long since lost its original color. Yet, for Maria, this space represented both her struggles and her hopes. One particularly gray afternoon, Maria sat at her rickety kitchen table, surrounded by a sea of job applications and bills. The weight of her solitude pressed heavily upon her shoulders. Seeking a brief respite from her worries, she reached for the old radio that sat on the windowsill. Her calloused fingers, testament to years of hard labor, fumbled with the dial. Static crackled through the speakers as she searched for a clear signal. Suddenly, a hauntingly beautiful melody emerged from the noise. The opening chords of a song she had never heard before filled the room. Maria's hand froze on the dial. The gentle strumming of a guitar accompanied by a melancholic voice captured her attention completely. Though she could not understand the words, the emotion in the singer's voice transcended language barriers. It spoke directly to the ache in her heart. As she listened, Maria found herself drawn closer to the radio, as if it were a lifeline to a world she longed to understand. The singer's voice, tinged with regret and longing, mirrored her own feelings of loss and separation. For the first time in years, Maria felt a connection to something beyond her daily struggles. The song ended, leaving Maria in a daze. The DJ's voice followed, announcing the title and artist. Maria scrambled for a pen, her hand shaking as she scribbled down the unfamiliar words, "Yesterday" by the Beatles. In that moment, a spark ignited within Maria. She realized that understanding this song, these words that had touched her so deeply, could be the key to bridging the gap between her past and her future. With renewed determination, she pulled her English textbook from the shelf where it had been gathering dust. Opening the book, Maria began to match the sounds she had heard to the letters on the page. It was a painstaking process, filled with frustration and small victories. Hours passed as she pored over the textbook, consulting her battered dictionary, and replaying the song in her mind. As night fell, Maria's kitchen table had transformed into a makeshift study area. Sheets of paper covered in her careful handwriting surrounded her, each one a step towards her goal. The radio played softly in the background, a constant reminder of the world she was determined to understand. Maria's eyes burned with fatigue, but she pressed on. Each word she deciphered felt like a small piece of a larger puzzle falling into place. She knew the road ahead would be long and challenging, but for the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of hope. As she worked, Maria allowed herself to imagine a future where she could navigate this new world with confidence. A future where she might, one day, hear her daughter's voice again. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. Spurring her to redouble her efforts. Outside, the city continued its ceaseless rhythm, unaware of the quiet transformation taking place within the walls of Maria's small apartment. Inside, armed with determination and the unexpected gift of a song, Maria took her first steps on a journey that would reshape her world. The soft glow of a desk lamp illuminated Maria's small living room, casting long shadows across the walls. The steady ticking of an old clock on the shelf marked the passage of time, each second a reminder of the long night ahead. Maria hunched over her makeshift study area, a collection of worn English textbooks, dog-eared dictionaries, and newspaper clippings about Liverpool spread before her. The aroma of stale coffee mingled with the musty scent of old books, creating an atmosphere both comforting and oppressive. Maria's eyes strained to focus on the words before her, the letters blurring together as exhaustion threatened to overtake her determination. She had been at this for hours, her shift at the diner long since ended, yet she pressed on. Scattered among the language materials were brochures and magazine cutouts featuring images of Liverpool. The Beatles' hometown had become a beacon of hope for Maria, a tangible goal that represented everything she had been working towards. In her mind, reaching Liverpool meant not only achieving her dreams but also somehow bridging the gap between her and the daughter she had left behind. As the night wore on, Maria's head began to nod, her body betraying her will to continue. The weight of her multiple jobs, endless study sessions, and constant worry about her future pressed down upon her. In a moment of weakness, she allowed her eyes to close, promising herself it would only be for a minute. Hours passed, and Maria remained slumped over her books, her cheek pressed against a page detailing English grammar rules. Her breathing was deep and steady, a stark contrast to the frenetic pace of her waking hours. As she slept, her lips moved slightly, forming words that held the key to her deepest desires. The shrill ring of her alarm clock shattered the pre-dawn silence, jolting Maria awake. Disoriented, she lifted her head, a page from her textbook momentarily sticking to her cheek. Panic set in as she realized she had overslept. This would make it the third time this week she would be late for her morning shift at the diner. As Maria rushed to get ready, her mind raced with the potential consequences of her tardiness. Her boss, a stern man with little patience for excuses, had already warned her twice about her late arrivals. The threat of losing this job loomed large, casting a shadow over all her carefully laid plans. Despite her haste, Maria couldn't help but cast a longing glance at her study materials as she headed for the door. The sight of the Liverpool brochures sent a pang through her heart. She questioned, not for the first time, whether she was sacrificing too much in pursuit of a dream that seemed to grow more distant with each passing day. The streets were quiet as Maria hurried towards the diner, the cool morning air biting at her skin. She replayed her boss's words from their last confrontation in her mind, his threat of termination hanging over her like a storm cloud. The weight of her responsibilities and the enormity of her dreams battled within her, each step forward a testament to her resilience. As she approached the diner, Maria steeled herself for the confrontation that was sure to come. She knew that every late arrival, every moment spent studying instead of resting, was a gamble. Yet, the alternative, giving up on her dreams, on the hope of reuniting with her daughter, was unthinkable. With a deep breath, Maria pushed open the diner door, the familiar smell of grease and coffee greeting her. As she braced herself for her boss's anger, she clung to the vision that had sustained her through countless nights of study and work, a future where she stood in Liverpool, fluent in English, successful, and somehow, miraculously, reunited with the daughter she had never stopped loving. The challenges ahead were daunting, but Maria had come too far to turn back now. Each obstacle was a test of her resolve, a chance to prove that her sacrifices were not in vain. As she tied on her apron and prepared to face another day, Maria silently reaffirmed her commitment to her dreams, no matter the cost. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Maria's small apartment, its golden light filtering through the threadbare curtains. Maria had just returned from another grueling shift at the diner, her feet aching and her mind weary. She had barely settled into her worn armchair when the shrill ring of her telephone pierced the silence. Maria's heart skipped a beat. Phone calls were rare in her solitary life, and unexpected ones even more so. With a mixture of curiosity and apprehension, she reached for the receiver. Her calloused fingers trembled slightly as she lifted it to her ear. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, speaking in carefully measured tones. As the stranger's words filtered through, Maria's world seemed to tilt on its axis. The caller claimed to have information about her long-lost daughter. Time seemed to stand still as Maria struggled to process what she was hearing. In the background, as if orchestrated by fate, the faint strains of Hello, Goodbye by the Beatles drifted from a neighbor's open window. The irony of the song's title was not lost on Maria as she grappled with the possibility of a reunion she had only dreamed of for decades. The caller's information was frustratingly vague. They had found someone who matched the description of Maria's daughter, but they couldn't be certain. The woman in question had been asking questions, searching for her birth mother. It could be a coincidence, or it could be the miracle Maria had been praying for all these years. As Maria listened, her free hand clutched the arm of her chair, knuckles turning white with the force of her grip. Her mind raced, hope and fear battling for dominance. Could this really be her daughter? Or was this some cruel trick of fate, or worse, a deliberate deception? The decision that lay before her was monumental. To pursue this lead would mean risking everything: her meager savings, her job, her heart. The possibility of disappointment loomed large, threatening to shatter the fragile hope she had nurtured for so long. Yet, the thought of letting this opportunity slip away was equally unbearable. Maria's gaze fell on the collection of Beatles memorabilia and English language books scattered around her small living space. Each item represented a step on her journey, a piece of the dream she had been building. Now, that dream seemed both tantalizingly close and frighteningly uncertain. If you're enjoying the story, don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below. As the caller waited for her response, Maria closed her eyes, memories of her daughter as a baby flooding her mind. The weight of years of separation, of countless nights spent wondering and worrying, pressed down upon her. She thought of all the sacrifices she had made, the hardships she had endured, all in the hope of one day reuniting with her child. The logical part of Maria's mind urged caution. This could be a scam, a cruel hoax designed to prey on her deepest desires. But her heart, long guarded but never truly healed, whispered of the possibility of closure, of finally filling the void that had been her constant companion for decades. With each passing second, the decision loomed larger. Maria knew that whatever choice she made would irrevocably alter the course of her life. To pursue this lead meant potentially upending the stability she had worked so hard to achieve. To ignore it meant possibly turning her back on the very thing she had been working towards all these years. The Beatles' song faded away, leaving Maria in silence save for the pounding of her own heart. She took a deep breath, steadying herself for the words that would shape her future. The trembling in her hands had ceased, replaced by a resolve that surprised even her. As Maria prepared to give her answer, she realized that regardless of the outcome, this moment marked a turning point. Whether this lead led to her daughter or to disappointment, she would no longer be the same person who had picked up the phone mere minutes ago. The echoes of her past had finally caught up with her present, and the future, for better or worse, was about to unfold in ways she could never have imagined. The bustling cafe seemed to fade into the background as Maria's eyes locked onto a young woman seated at a corner table. Time seemed to stand still as Maria took in every detail of the stranger's face, a face that could have been her own for decades ago. The resemblance was uncanny, from the curve of her cheekbones to the slight tilt of her eyes. Maria's heart raced, its thunderous beating drowning out the ambient noise of clinking cups and murmured conversations. She had imagined this moment countless times over the years, but reality proved far more overwhelming than any daydream. Her feet felt rooted to the spot, caught between the desperate urge to rush forward and the paralyzing fear of rejection. The young woman glanced up from her book, her gaze sweeping the room with casual indifference. Her eyes passed over Maria without a flicker of recognition, and Maria felt a sharp pang in her chest. Of course, she reminded herself, this woman had no reason to know her. To her, Maria was just another stranger in a sea of faces. Gathering every ounce of courage she possessed, Maria took a tentative step forward. The scent of the young woman's perfume wafted towards her, triggering a flood of memories. It was eerily similar to the baby powder fragrance Maria remembered from those precious few moments she had held her newborn daughter. The familiarity of it nearly brought her to her knees. As Maria approached, the young woman looked up again, this time with a hint of curiosity in her eyes. Maria's throat constricted, words failing her in this crucial moment. She had rehearsed what she would say countless times, but now, face to face with the living embodiment of her deepest hopes and fears, language seemed woefully inadequate. The silence stretched between them, pregnant with unspoken questions and decades of separation. Maria's hands trembled as she fought the urge to reach out and touch the young woman's face, to assure herself that this was real and not another cruel dream. In that moment of hesitation, Maria saw a flicker of something in the young woman's eyes, a mix of confusion, wariness, and perhaps a glimmer of recognition. It was as if, on some subconscious level, her body remembered what her mind could not. The weight of the past pressed down on Maria, every sacrifice, every lonely night, every small victory that had led her to this moment. She knew that whatever happened next would irrevocably change both their lives. The truth she carried was a double-edged sword, capable of healing old wounds or creating new ones. As Maria struggled to find her voice, memories of the day she had given up her daughter flooded back. The pain of that separation, dulled by time but never truly gone, surged anew. She remembered the tiny bundle in her arms, the softness of her baby's skin, and the heart-wrenching moment when she had to let go. The cafe around them continued its rhythmic hum, oblivious to the monumental reunion unfolding in its midst. Maria took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. She knew that once she spoke, there would be no going back. The truth would be out, for better or worse. With a voice thick with emotion, Maria finally broke the silence. Her words came out barely above a whisper, laden with years of longing and regret. She asked the question that had haunted her for decades, the one that would bridge the chasm between them or widen it irreparably. The young woman's reaction was impossible to predict. Would there be joy at finding a long-lost mother, or anger at perceived abandonment? Would the bonds of blood overcome years of separation? Or would the weight of the past prove too heavy to bear? As Maria waited for a response, time seemed to stretch infinitely. In that suspended moment, the entire trajectory of both their lives hung in the balance. Whatever came next, Maria knew that nothing would ever be the same. The reunion she had dreamed of for so long had finally arrived, bringing with it the potential for healing or heartbreak, reconciliation or rejection. The next few moments would determine whether the sacrifices of the past had been worth it. whether the dreams that had sustained Maria through countless hardships would finally come to fruition. As mother and daughter stood on the precipice of a new chapter, the air between them crackled with the electricity of possibility and the weight of unspoken histories. The brisk Liverpool air whipped around Maria and her daughter as they stepped off the ferry, carrying with it the sharp scent of salt and sea. The sky above was a canvas of gray, punctuated by brief glimpses of sunlight struggling to break through the clouds. For Maria, this moment felt surreal, a dream decades in the making finally realized. As they stood on the dock, both women were acutely aware of the weight of their shared history and the uncertainty of their future. The journey to this point had been fraught with emotional turbulence, filled with tearful confessions, painful revelations, and tentative steps towards understanding. Now, in the birthplace of the music that had been Maria's lifeline, they faced the challenge of forging a relationship built on more than just biological ties. Maria's eyes darted between the unfamiliar landscape and her daughter's face, searching for signs of the connection she so desperately hoped to build. The young woman's expression was a mix of wonder and apprehension, mirroring Maria's own conflicted emotions. They had come so far, yet the distance between them still felt vast and daunting. As they began to walk towards the city center, the faint strains of a familiar melody drifted from a nearby shop. The song, an iconic Beatles tune about hope and new beginnings, seemed to underscore the poignancy of their situation. Maria felt a lump form in her throat, remembering countless nights spent listening to this very song, dreaming of this moment. Their footsteps fell into sync as they navigated the bustling streets, each lost in their own thoughts. Maria's mind raced with questions she longed to ask, stories she yearned to share. Her daughter, too, seemed on the verge of speech several times, only to fall silent again, the words apparently stuck in her throat. The tension between them was palpable, a delicate balance of hope and fear. Both women wanted to bridge the gap that years of separation had created, but the path forward was unclear. Every glance, every hesitant smile, carried the weight of unspoken emotions and unrealized dreams. As they rounded a corner, the iconic Liver Building came into view, its clock towers standing sentinel over the city. Maria gasped softly, the sight bringing home the reality of where they were. Her daughter turned to her, a flicker of understanding passing between them. In that moment, something shifted, almost imperceptibly. Slowly, haltingly, the young woman began to speak. Her voice, tinged with emotion, recounted how a simple piece of advice had shaped the course of her life. With each word, Maria felt her heart swell, realizing that despite their separation, she had managed to influence her daughter's path in a profound way. The revelation acted as a catalyst, breaking down some of the barriers between them. As they continued their exploration of Liverpool, their conversation flowed more freely. They shared stories of their lives, filling in the gaps of lost time. Laughter mingled with tears as they discovered shared traits and divergent experiences. Yet, beneath the surface of this newfound connection, undercurrents of complex emotions still swirled. There were moments of awkward silence, instances where the weight of their past threatened to overwhelm the fragile bond they were building. The road ahead would not be easy, both women knew. There were wounds that would take time to heal, trust that needed to be rebuilt. As the day wore on, Maria and her daughter found themselves at the famous Strawberry Field Gates. Standing before this landmark, so integral to the music that had sustained Maria's hope for decades, they felt the full circle nature of their journey. The past, present, and potential future converged in this moment, fraught with both possibility and uncertainty. The Liverpool sky had begun to clear, patches of blue peeking through the gray. As a ray of sunlight broke through, illuminating their faces, Maria and her daughter turned to each other. No words were needed in that instant. Their eyes met, conveying a mix of hope, fear, determination, and a shared resolve to face whatever came next. Together, as they left Strawberry Field, walking side by side into the heart of Liverpool, the future stretched before them, unknown, challenging, but filled with the promise of a connection long denied. The music of the Beatles, which had been the soundtrack to Maria's dreams for so long, now seemed to herald the beginning of a new chapter in both their lives. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe now so you don't miss the next one from Lily's Stories. Thank you for listening. Hope to see you in the next one.